Welcome to a very special Halloween edition of Philosophy and Ethics in Games, the series where I break down the stories in some of our favorite games and figure out what is right and what is wrong. I'm Josh Bearheart Hawk, and today we're heading off down the beaten path as we start our exploration of Hackett's Quarry in the 2022 horror thriller, The Quarry. In case you missed any of the previous episodes in the Philosophy and Ethics series, I've linked a playlist in the description below. As I continue to break down this and other games, I'll add new videos to the playlist so you can find them all in one place. The Quarry is a choice-based horror game released by Supermassive Games in 2022, and it follows the story of a group of camp counselors who are just trying to survive the final night at summer camp. It draws inspiration from the movies like Friday the 13th, and even has a bit of Tucker and Dale vs. Evil thrown in just to spice things up. Over the next few weeks, we're going to be picking apart the story and trying our best to get everyone out alive. Oh yeah, you can lose some or all of the characters along the way, and it's not always as simple as just making the morally right choice in this one. I also want to stress that there will be spoilers, just like pretty much every other video here on the channel. And even if you've played the game, you might wind up having something spoiled because there's a wide range of possible endings. With that out of the way, let's jump into The Quarry. We're going to start with Chapter 1, which would normally make sense. And we open to find the end of another glorious summer camp year at the Hackett's Quarry summer camp. A bus full of former campers is making its way into the sunset, and the counselors for the camp are preparing to leave as well. But before they can head home for the winter, there's a van to pack up and some final goodbyes to be said. We open by following Jacob, the stereotypical jock of the group. He's waving goodbye to the campers and talking to one of their other counselors, Caitlin, about summer love. Jacob and Emma had a fling over the summer, but it's come to a crashing halt as Emma wasn't interested in a long-distance relationship, and she and Jacob will be going to schools in different states. After a brief stop at the sign where he recites the camp slogan to help foreshadow things to come,
"What doesn't kill you will make you stronger." Not in the mood, sign.
Jacob struggles to get inside the main building as two of his other fellow counselors mess with him, before finally rounding up the rest of the gear and bringing it out to the van. After a brief conversation about his failed love life with Caitlin, he comes up with a plan to make the summer last just one more night.
Total hypothetical, but if I was like a huge asshole and I wanted to break down the van so we'd have to spend another night here, what exactly would I need to do?
Well, you'd probably break the fuel line, or, I don't know, rip out the rotor arm. And yes, that would make you a total asshole.
Okay, and what does a rotor arm look like again?
It's like an arm that's all rotary. You know, it's under the little black dome with the leads poking out.
To be fair, his sabotage of the van seems a bit obvious, and the fact that his questions about how to disable it go so far over Caitlin's head is a little odd. But we have to suspend our disbelief just a little to enjoy the story here. Jacob can either steal the rotor arm of the van or break the fuel line. And since breaking the fuel line seems a bit more risky, stealing the rotor arm wins the day. It's actually probably pertinent to mention here that we don't have to make all of these decisions blindly. See, there's this fortune teller woman that we get to visit with occasionally, who will give us brief glimpses into possible futures if, and only if, we've managed to locate her lost tarot cards as we venture through the story. She'll play a bigger role later on, but for now we can peek at a visit we had with her prior to the start of the chapter, where she showed a burning van. This seems like the likely outcome of having fuel all over the engine, and makes me lean even harder into stealing the tiny rotor arm that couldn't possibly cause any other issues later on. With that little bit of sabotage out of the way, Jacob joins Caitlin as they get their phones back from Nick and Dylan, before we join our next set of counselors, Abigail and Emma. To be fair, there are a lot of names to remember, but it's not really much different than a normal slasher film, so it's all good. Abigail is the easiest one to remember for me personally because I have a sister with the same name, and she's probably one of the more likable characters overall. She is an artist, which will be referenced a couple of times throughout the story, and kind of a loner. Basically, she's the complete opposite of Emma, who shows up to greet her with the high five to celebrate successfully seeing the last of the campers off. Emma is one of those social media influencers. You know, the ones who make videos for people to watch on websites like, I can't think of any sites off the top of my head, but I think it's a Gen Z thing or something. Before going to join the others and get their phones back so Emma can reconnect with her audience of, I assume, like 5,760 or so subscribers on whatever social media site she's on, she and Abigail have to decide to either break into the cabin where their bags are, or wait for the head of the camp, Mr. Hackett, to unlock the door for them. I obviously had Abigail choose to help break the door down because she needs to get out and be a little more friendly with people. And what's a better bonding activity than a little B&E among friends? Besides, maybe it'll teach Mr. Hackett to lock the doors before everyone has their stuff out. We, of course, have to get a good look around to check for any tarot cards because the old lady that tells the future won't be too happy with us if we don't return her cards. And then it's off to the main building to rejoin the group. Oh, yeah, I also need to mention the toy bunny that Abigail finds inside the cabin that we choose to break into, because it becomes incredibly important later on. I want you to put the picture of that bunny in your mind and just remember it for the next few weeks, as it's going to be something that you don't want to forget about.
Let's get you back to Izzy.
I didn't manage to locate any tarot cards, but I'm sure it'll be fine. The ride back to camp is a bit bumpy, and Emma lets Abby decide whether to take the long way or the short way. And of course, I take the long way because why not? We also find out as we drive that Abby has some mad pickup skills, as she's been scoping out Nick all summer and plans to reach out to him after camp by sending an email.
Why don't you get his handle? Hit him up.
Oh, I already have his email. It was in the packet they gave to us on the first day.
Email? Are you 93?
What's wrong with email?
Okay, so hear me out on this, because back in the day, I actually did send my then ex-girlfriend an email asking her out on a date, and we've been married for nearly 2 decades now. So maybe Abby has more game than anyone realizes. Anyway, after a nice scenic drive, the girls wind up back with the group, and we take control of Dylan this time as he struggles to manage life with a low phone battery. Before long, the group is joined by the final member, Ryan, as he emerges from listening to a podcast. While he says the podcast was about ghost stories surrounding Hackett's Quarry, we all know he was really listening to the Philosophy and Ethics in Games playlist. Though, we will go along with his lie and pretend like he was really listening to something about the Hag of Hackett's Quarry, a story that will become more relevant at some point later on. Or not. I mean, who really knows where this whole thing is going anyway, right? It's a horror story after all, not necessarily a ghost story. The story is one that Ryan has been telling the kids all summer, and it's apparently caused some issues, as we find out in a little bit that parents have called to complain that their kids have been coming home too scared to sleep because of the ghost stories that Ryan tells. And I just can't help but wonder what kind of kids are going to summer camp and not expecting to hear ghost stories. I mean, okay, maybe they're really young and they don't know the difference between a story and reality, but come on. Summer camp is all about telling spooky stories around the campfire while eating s'mores and then singing cringy songs. Maybe the parents of little Timmy just need to sit him down and tell him to man up. You can't be 7 forever, Timmy. It's time to learn what the real world is like. You want real horror? Try getting a job and a mortgage and then dealing with the American healthcare system. Then come crying to me about your nightmares. Where was I? Oh, yeah. We finally meet the mysterious Mr. Hackett, and he actually seems like a pretty chill guy, unless you want to charge your phone that's been sitting on a shelf all summer. After shooting down Dylan's hopes of getting more battery power, Mr. Hackett takes Ryan with him into the office to look for the keys to the van. And we not only find out about the ghost story issue from before, but we also have the chance to listen in on a phone conversation that seems just a bit odd.
Hello. Yeah. What? Because kids are kids. They only do so much, bro. They're almost out of here, all right?
You're cutting it pretty close. We don't want to have...
Just hold your damn horses, all right? Everything's A-okay on this end.
Bobby and I are geared up. If he's in the area, we'll get him.
This is a waste of time. You know it, I know it. No, should I have?
He's gone quiet.
Try staying out of the way. Speaking of which, the longer you keep me on this damn phone, the longer it's gonna take me to get rid of these damn kids. Yeah, of course. Adios.
Strictly speaking, eavesdropping on people's phone calls is technically wrong, but Mr. Hackett is basically like a father figure to Ryan, and who among us didn't listen to our parents' phone calls from time to time in the hopes of learning some juicy gossip? Whoever he's talking to seems intent on getting the counselors out of camp sooner rather than later, and it sounds like there's something serious going on. They're looking for someone, and they can't really start their search until the camp is empty. Ryan's not exactly smart when it comes to espionage, though, so he gets caught eavesdropping by Mr. Hackett, though he doesn't seem too worried about Ryan hearing the conversation. He doesn't yell at Ryan, but he is disappointed. After scolding Ryan for scaring kids with ghost stories and acting extremely awkward, Mr. Hackett finds the keys to the van and the pair head back outside. Ignoring the fact that Mr. Hackett and others insist on calling the van a minivan when it is definitely not a minivan, the vehicle doesn't start thanks to Jacob's earlier actions. You would think Caitlin would be suspicious, but she doesn't speak up and Mr. Hackett starts to really panic. Now, he could load them all up in his truck and take them somewhere for the night if he really needed them to be gone, but instead he hands Ryan the keys to the building and tells him to make sure everyone is inside all night. To the group, he sounds just as crazy as he sounds to us, but he seems really worried about them being outside on the property after dark. If it were me, and I didn't want to drive them all someplace, I would have at least made up some story about a killer on the loose or something that would hopefully scare them into listening if it was really a big deal. After all, they're all in their late teens, maybe early 20s, and there's no way they're going to stay inside for the night when there's the chance to hang out around a campfire with no campers around. But horror stops for no one, and Mr. Hackett isn't really thinking straight. And, of course, as soon as Mr. Hackett is gone, it takes all of 5 seconds for Dylan to suggest that they spend the night partying instead of going inside like they were instructed.
We could go inside until morning.
Yeah.
Or we could do something else. Who cares what Chris told us to do? He's not our boss anymore. P-A-R-T. Why the fuck not? All right, it seems like the stars have aligned for us, no?
Still having control of Ryan and being about 20 years his senior, I do the responsible thing and suggest the group do as they were told. That doesn't really fly, and Ryan is outnumbered as the group votes for a night of fun despite my attempts to be a buzzkill. As everyone fans out to collect supplies for the night, we get some insight into why they were told to stay inside, as it's revealed a pair of men is watching over the counselors from a nearby hill. That alone would be creepy enough, but seeing them covered in what appears to be blood and hammering a hunting season sign into the ground just makes things so much worse. Starting with the party supply gathering, we join Emma and Jacob at the camp store, as Emma is partaking in her second breaking and entering crime of the evening. Jacob is trying to pick the lock in the building, but I don't see Emma as the patient type, so we wind up kicking the door down instead. The store itself is pretty bare, having been shut down for the season and whatnot, but the pair are still able to find some beer, and Emma manages to locate a shotgun with some ammo that really only makes sense to take because we know that we're in a horror game. Seriously, they've been there all summer and have never had the need for a weapon as far as we know, especially as there were kids at the camp, and there is more than one mention of the fact that there are no bears that call the area home. The biggest predator the group would come up against would be, I don't know, a raccoon? Raccoons are kind of shifty. I'm just saying. I wouldn't want to run into one in the dark forest. Have you ever seen a raccoon handle a switchblade? They're more dangerous than people realize. But I digress. Before leaving the store, Emma and Jacob also manage to find some fireworks and a snack from Jacob's childhood that apparently brings back good memories for him.
Pop, pop, peanut butter pops. Pop, pop, pop them in your mouth. Pop. Oh my god, they're like the greatest snack of all time.
Finally, they load everything up in a wheelbarrow and head off to meet the rest of the group at the fire pit. Meanwhile, Dylan and Ryan are hanging out in Mr. Hackett's office, charging phones and snooping around. Well, Dylan is snooping because I'm controlling him and I'm rather nosy. The first big thing that he manages to find is a trap door behind the desk that leads down into a basement below the lodge. That's not necessarily too creepy, as it could be a secondary escape hatch in the event of an emergency or something. Like, if zombies are breaking down the door and Mr. Hackett or someone needs to escape, it's the perfect way out. But that isn't the only oddity, as Dylan also discovers what appears to be either a panic room or a secret surveillance room in the back of Mr. Hackett's closet. Again, I am fully aware that snooping and eavesdropping and general spying is usually wrong, but it's so hard to resist finding out more about people when they leave you alone in their empty summer camp while acting so suspiciously. Oh, and this section also produces what just might be one of the most fun exchanges in the entire game.
Dude, we're gonna be out partying in the woods tonight, all right? What if the bears try to crash? Okay, it's like my mom always said, if you want to party, you gotta bring protection.
Well, I think that she was talking about condoms.
I'm not gonna fuck a bear.
Back in the great outdoors, we find Abigail and Nick taking a stroll through the woods. They're looking for firewood and a romantic connection, and we find out that Nick is a bit of a stalker.
They always seem to listen to you during painting class.
You've seen my class?
Just walking by.
The art cabin's all the way out of the way.
Yeah, well, there's this shortcut that I take that goes by.
Honestly, I'm rooting for them, and I'll move heaven and earth to make sure that they both make it out of this quarry alive if it's the last thing I do. Although, I will say I'm not sure I like where the discussion goes between them as the subject of philosophy comes up.
Like, whatever happens is what was meant to happen.
Like it's all predetermined. Fate.
I don't know. I'm not sure we're supposed to know.
Yeah. Fate just seems so convenient.
How so?
Because if it's all predetermined and you do something terrible, then you have the excuse of saying, well, it wasn't really me because everything's been pre-planned and then I'm not really in control of my actions, am I?
Stay in your lane, Abigail. Don't forget I have control over who lives and dies, and I don't take kindly to any of you trying to one-up me on my own channel. After a little more walking, Abigail wisely puts the philosophy book down and picks up her pencil to sketch a scene of the sun setting over the lake so she can remember it when she wants to draw it later on. She's interrupted, though, by something in a nearby bush, and the pair are surprised to see a baby boar come trotting into the clearing. Yes, I know it's called a piglet or sometimes a boarlet. Just let me have this one. And Abigail shows that nature isn't really her strong suit as she rushes over to pet the barely newborn animal with no regard for the fact that it is a wild animal and that it probably has a parent not too far away that isn't going to be happy to see some human manhandling its baby. Sure enough, the mama boar comes in with fire in her eyes and nearly takes the disrespectful humans out. And you know what? I'm not rooting for them anymore. They just couldn't leave well enough alone, and now that boarlet is going to get grounded and possibly wind up growing up thinking it can just hang out with whatever humans might wander into the woods. Eventually, it'll come walking up to the wrong person and wind up on a sandwich. Probably a sandwich with wheat bread. For now, though, Nick and Abigail escape the hog of Hackett's quarry with nothing more than Nick's bruised ego, and they head back to join the others. Caitlin beats the rest of the group to the fire pit, but she's joined shortly by everyone else, and after settling a dispute between Jacob and Nick over who should get the peanut butter pops by outshooting them in a contest where several watermelons are harmed, she and the rest of the counselors start up a game of truth or dare. Dylan establishes the rules, using his own house rules that he insists are unique.
How about the ultimate game of secrets and lies, truth or dare, but Dylan style? Okay, house rules are, someone asks you truth or dare, then you choose, and then you do. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts.
So like normal truth or dare.
Yes.
And even makes sure to include a clause that consent is required for the dares. And hats off to Dylan for making that point, as it would have been easy to just allow peer pressure to take over. The game goes pretty smooth, and not much happens until Caitlin dares Emma to kiss either Jacob, who she's been having a summer fling with, or Nick, who Abigail has been crushing on. Jacob assumes that he's going to be picked, but Emma throws a curveball and goes for Nick. Abigail and Jacob both end up upset, storming off and going their own way, and before long, Emma and Nick are chasing down their respective partners, or whatever they are at this point, leading the group to being mostly separated in the woods at night and bringing this episode to a close. Well, almost to a close, as it turns out the weird guys from earlier are still watching the group from a nearby hill, and now we have to wonder what their intentions are as they seem to be following the couples away from the campfire. Next, we'll get our first glimpse at the horrors waiting in the woods as the group comes face to face with the mysterious strangers, and we lose our first counselor in an unexpected way.
Looks like we have a choice on our hands. Do we snoop through someone else's belongings, or do we open the spooky trapdoor and die a horrible, painful death?
Welcome back to the Hackett's Quarry Summer Camp, where what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I'm your guide for this special Halloween Philosophy and Ethics in Game series, Josh Bearheart Hawk, and this week we're picking up right where we left off at the end of episode 1. Caitlin, Ryan, and Dylan are alone by the fire after Emma went off looking for Jacob and Nick went after Abby. It would seem summer love isn't all it's cracked up to be. Before our trio can continue the game of Truth or Dare, however, the sound of a gunshot and a scream breaks through the night air, and they magically teleport to the edge of the nearby forest where they find Abby begging for help. Something has happened to Nick, and it doesn't look good. After running away from camp in the last episode, Abby found herself roaming in the dark woods all alone, which is the ideal way to travel in a horror game or movie. Everyone knows, after all, that the one person to make it out of the slasher flick alive is the person who spends the most time alone in the dark forest or room. But she isn't alone. Something or someone is out in the forest with her, and we get a glimpse and a whisper from whatever it is as she starts to realize the predicament she's landed herself in. And things don't get any less weird when she discovers one of the trail cams Mr. Hackett had set up to spy on or monitor the campers or whatever else might be stalking the woods. On the one hand, we have to question why the man who runs the summer camp would want to have so many cameras. What with the setup that Dylan discovered in the last episode and now the camera that Abigail has found, but it's also kind of a smart move. Think about it for just a second. We've all heard of the missing 411 thing, where people go missing in national parks and forests, and many times are never found. Well, if more trail cameras were set up in the woods, we might just be surprised at how quickly we would find those missing people. Well, not the missing people who have been lost for a long time. They probably made a meal for Bigfoot at some point. We all know that Sasquatch prefers to eat campers as fresh as possible, so there's not really much chance that we find them. But for future campers that go missing, having a solid network of cameras covering every inch of the forest would be the perfect way to ensure that they can be quickly found. But getting back to Abby, Nick finally locates her, and the two sit down on a log to hash things out. She's heard that the man that she wasn't dating yet had made out with another woman right in front of her, and like a typical man, he has no idea why she's so upset. He just can't fathom how his actions could have possibly upset Abigail. And to be honest, I hate the whole miscommunication trope in so many movies and games, where people hide their true feelings or don't disclose things because it sets such a stupid precedent. People see these kind of characters on TV and in movies and games, and they think that not talking through things or sharing your true thoughts and feelings is somehow the normal, healthy way to deal with things, and it's just so wrong. I bring that up because, as Abigail, we have the chance to either beat around the bush with Nick or tell it to him like it is. And I go with the direct approach with the intent of stopping the BS. The miscommunication trope is not some goal to aspire to, people. It's a lesson we're supposed to learn to avoid those kind of problems in real life. Take that lesson and be honest with the people that you care about in your life, because you never know when they're going to be attacked by a werewolf in the... Oh, wait, shit. Did I say werewolf? I mean, you never know when they're going to be alone in the woods at night with some unknown thing stalking them. Anyway, so let's go check in with Emma and Jacob. So Jacob's feeling sorry for himself down by the dock, and Emma finds him unsuccessfully skipping rocks and pretending like he didn't care about what just happened. They share a brief moment, with Emma toying with Jacob's feelings a bit before giving in and telling him to get some towels so that they can share one last night in the swimming hole before saying goodbye. In reality, this is really messed up on Emma's part because she's giving Jacob false hope. Like, he knows deep down that they aren't going to be a couple once the summer ends, but the way that she's leading him on would be a sliver of hope for him and just bring more heartache later. As he walks off to retrieve the towels, we get a reminder of the part he stole from the van that is still on his person, and we find a tarot card. The creepy gypsy lady is going to be so pleased. Just wait till we see her. A little additional snooping reveals a forgotten newspaper that one of the more nerdy campers no doubt left behind, and we find a family photo of Chris Hackett alongside someone we can only assume is his brother. I'm sure this family lineage will never come up again. Making our way upstairs, we find a couple of other things to mention, with the first being a set of rules the counselors were supposed to follow for sailing. Most of these make sense, I suppose, though if boats capsize, remove kids immediately seems to be in conflict with do not jump in after them, sail over and retrieve them from water. If for no other reason, then I'm fairly confident that the capsizing would remove them from the boat without the need of the lifeguards or counselors. Unless that was supposed to mean remove the other kids from the water, that just seems like a waste of time. Why bother focusing on the kids who aren't in the process of drowning? Well, it's not like any of that really matters, though. Summer's over. We just need to ignore the old rules and focus on Jacob and Emma. It's not like there's a body to retrieve from the lake or anything. The notes are the least of our worries, however, as a conveniently placed pair of binoculars gives us something new to look at in the form of a shadow on the island across the way. It's probably just our imagination, and Emma is still waiting for those towels, so we should probably get back to her. Only there's no towels left, so there won't be any drying off tonight. The couple winds up having a little fun flirting before Jacob ruins it by trying to be a little bit too sentimental. Emma swims off, leaving Jacob floundering, before the sound of a scream and a gunshot breaks through the night. And that catches us up to the point where we left Dylan, Ryan, and Caitlin at. But there is a moment more here, as Jacob realizes that taking the tiny piece he stole off the van into the water was a bad idea. He has to decide whether to go check on whoever was screaming or dive back in to recover the part. And of course we're diving back in because have you seen horror movies? If we don't save that part, someone is definitely going to die trying to escape because the van won't start later. Thankfully, Jacob is part mermaid and can not only see extremely well in the moonlit water, but he can also hold his breath for an extremely long period of time. And now I'm understanding why Emma liked him so much. Forget I said that. There's a little bit of tension as Jacob has to free himself, not once but twice, from the razor wire below the surface of the water, and what the actual expletive? This is a lake where children play. Sure, they're in boats a lot of the time, but those boats obviously capsize, giving the explicit instructions about what to do if that very thing happens. Are you telling me that they just leave these dangerous chains and razor wire feet below the surface? And we can pretend that it isn't razor wire, but I've seen razor wire in person, and that is 100% razor wire. It turns out that Jacob is immune to razor wire though, and after freeing himself and rescuing the rotor arm, Jacob swims safely back up to the... Oh my god, what is that? Now there's also a body in the lake, tangled in the chains and razor wire. What kind of camp is Chris Hackett running? Why are there just bodies, bloated but definitely from the past few months, just floating in the lake that the kids played in on a regular basis? I'm starting to seriously question the safety of this camp. Someone needs to call the local authorities ASAP and shut this place down. Actually, hold on to that thought. Hopping back in with Ryan, Caitlin, and Abby, Ryan takes off into the woods in search of Abby's lost love, showing us some mad parkour skills in the process. When he finally reaches Nick, Ryan is a bit surprised to see what appears to be a pissed-off hillbilly dragging his friend off into the darkness. The first instinct here is to shoot, but that is way too obvious. The guy could just be trying to help, and for all we know, he is either unable to speak for some reason, or he's trying to be quiet to avoid something. He doesn't seem overly threatening either way, but if Ryan doesn't act, Nick will. Seemingly turning into a cannibal, Nick bites the man's finger off and takes off in Ryan's general direction before the pair are able to finally escape as the man takes a shot at Nick and then shoots the remaining part of his own finger off. Just a normal evening in the woods of Hackett's Quarry, all things considered. But even as the man disappears into the darkness and Ryan and Nick get away, we find ourselves back with Jacob, who wanders into the stranger as well thanks to a trap. The man cuts Jacob down and proceeds to cover him in what seems to be blood, the same stuff the man and his partner were covered in earlier. Jacob has the option to throw dirt at him instead, but as he seems to be more helpful than harmful at the moment, we'll go along with it. Once that little moment is over, the man gets up and heads off into the woods, seemingly tracking something using some kind of device, more or less confirming our suspicion that he's not out there to hurt the counselors. But something is out there to hurt them, and we swing back over to the fire pit to find Caitlin trying to get Abby to sketch the thing that attacked her and Nick, as Dylan and Ryan tend to Nick's wounds. Nick is trying to explain that some kind of animal attacked him, though as Ryan only saw a guy in the woods, he's leaning toward Nick just being a little bit delusional. It does seem odd, though, that the man would have attacked Nick so brutally, only to then turn around and try to drag him away. This thought might not occur to Ryan and Dylan, but perhaps it should. Nothing is making a lot of sense at the moment, and the last thing they need to do is to lose their minds and jump to conclusions. That's the kind of rash thinking that gets people killed. And it isn't long before we see the real risk, as a noise in the bushes near the fire pit grabs the attention of the group. There's no way to tell if the noise is coming from a friend, or a foe, or a harmless little bunny rabbit, especially as whatever is moving around isn't identifying itself and Ryan has a decision to make. He can either fire his gun blindly into the bush, or he can hold off. The tension is high, and no one wants to wind up like Nick, so the idea of shooting first and asking questions later makes sense. But we're trying to avoid the horror movie tropes and do things just a little bit smarter. And holding fire turns out to be the best move, as Jacob finally comes jumping out of the bushes. Why he didn't make himself known sooner is a mystery, though it's likely due to the fact that he wanted to drum up the suspense for the sake of the audience. He's actually a really thoughtful victim, and I don't understand why Emma wanted to let him get away. Did I say victim? I meant protagonist. He is a really thoughtful protagonist. After a brief exchange, Ryan tells Jacob that he and the others are going back to the lodge, as Jacob says he's going to look for Emma on the island, before Jacob tries to take the gun from Ryan in one of the stupidest moves that he could possibly make. Seriously, he grabs it and the two start a game of tug-of-war like it's some kind of harmless object. It's a loaded firearm, for heaven's sake. No one should ever act like that around a weapon, especially one that is ready to fire. These things are dangerous and should be treated as such, with safety being paramount. Especially when you're trapped out in the woods with a killer or killers on the loose. Thankfully, Ryan has the option to just let the gun go, and it hits Jacob in the face instead of shooting him, giving Caitlin an opening to save the day. As the group and Jacob go their separate ways, we catch up with Emma, who's living her best life and doing what any sane person in her situation would do, recording her thoughts for her subscribers. As she vents to the camera, she explores the island a bit, and we stumble on another amazing tarot card. Oh, and we catch a glimpse of the old man we saw hanging out with Cletus earlier. Well, we really don't know their names at the moment, but I think the big guy just looks like a Cletus. I can't just go on calling them the big guy and old guy forever, you know? But we're getting off track again. Emma is actually one of the more fun characters to hang out with in the game because she's insanely self-aware, and her sarcasm reminds me of, well, me. I could see myself being that sarcastic asshole if I wound up in the middle of a horror movie or game, so it's super easy to insert myself into the story here. She also has a fun view of islands that I could totally get on board with.
You know, when I was little, I used to think that islands just kind of would float in the middle of the water, kind of like an airbed.
After a little more exploring, she winds up heading into the treehouse that Jacob thought he saw a shadow in earlier, finding a little more than she bargained for in the process. For one thing, there's a bag that she doesn't recognize as belonging to anyone she knows, just kind of chilling out as if it popped into being there. As if that wasn't enough, a noise from above catches her off guard, and we now have to choose to either snoop in the bag or check out the noise. And of course, I'm going to snoop in the bag. You have to know by now, I can't resist checking out things that I'm not supposed to be looking at. It turns out, though, that we get to have our cake and eat it too in this scenario, as after stealing some clothes, bear spray, and a taser from the bag, Emma goes for the trapdoor in the ceiling. She jokingly predicts her own demise, and as the door opens above her, that prediction very nearly becomes reality. A monster comes crashing down into the treehouse, causing her to scream and back up. But thankfully, she doesn't drop her phone. I say thankfully because after tasing the beast, she takes its photo, which is smart because there is no way her subscribers are going to believe this. She is on the verge of having one of those completely real, viral videos that show a totally not faked monster encounter. If she plays her cards right, she could wind up on all of the hottest compilation channels, cashing in on the fame with a podcast and everything. Of course, I suppose it would be helpful if she escaped the monster first, though. There's a quick chase sequence where Emma has to avoid more than one obstacle on the path to freedom, and it all culminates with her shocking the beast one more time before climbing to relative safety in the attic of the treehouse. But she isn't completely safe just yet, as the monster manages to follow her up onto the roof of the structure as she's reeling in the zip line that connects the island to the mainland. She's not able to get it all the way up before the beast corners her, and it takes a Herculean effort to jump over and grab onto the handles that will whisk her to safety. Finally escaping, she winds up running into Jacob, who is way more happy to see her than she is to see him. After catching up, the two become slightly self-aware as Emma recounts the thing that attacked her.
I'm glad you're okay.
Yeah, barely. I mean, the thing that attacked me at the treehouse was like...
What? It was like what, Emma?
like out of a horror movie.
But they don't have long to reminisce, as another beast comes after them, and the pair are once again separated as Jacob accidentally pushes Emma off a walkway before running for his life and sealing his eventual fate. And by eventual fate, I mean that we're not going to concern ourselves with trying to save him, since he couldn't seem to make an effort to save the woman he supposedly loves. Though we don't really have much say in what happens to him, at least at the moment, as he steps into a bear trap and gets knocked out by Cletus's friend. And, you know, for a place with no real bear problem, this area seems to be overflowing with things that could be used to stop them. From the shotgun that Emma found in the storage room, to the bear spray that we found in the treehouse, and now the bear traps, it seems like bears are all over the place. Or I guess all of that could be intended to stop the monsters that seem to be crawling out of the woodwork now. That's also a possibility. Moving away from Jacob and Emma, we rejoin Abby and the others as they make their way back into the building that they were supposed to stay in the first place. As they come through the doors, we even discover another tarot card, meaning we're going to be able to make that old fortune teller lady really happy at some point. But pleasing Granny will have to wait, as Caitlin and Abby tend to Nick's wounds while Dylan and Ryan look for a way to call for help. As they make their way to Mr. Hackett's office to try the phone, Dylan hears a spooky voice calling his name, and we're reminded a bit of the ghost stories Ryan was so into. The voice isn't enough to really direct Dylan to anything in particular, and we soon find ourselves in the office as the pair try to figure out how calling emergency services works. Before they grab the phone, Dylan pulls Chekhov's gun off the wall, and Ryan struggles to find the right words to say.
Who should I call?
Mr. H?
The only number I got is to this phone.
Okay, then 911.
You mean 911? Who says 911?
I don't know.
Anyway, yeah, but like, what should I ask for? Like, police? Ambulance?
Cops. With guns. We need a lot of backup out here.
So they'll say, 911, what's your emergency? And then I say, help, my friends may have been attacked by a bear, or maybe not a bear, but definitely an animal with teeth. And we're not sure how many there are out there or how smart they are, so it's very possible they might be mounting an attack on us right now, and we really need backup.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
Honestly, how Ryan manages to accomplish anything is beyond me. I get being a little nervous when calling for help, but he takes that nervousness to a whole new level. It doesn't really matter how nervous he is, though, as the call is disconnected as soon as it's answered. This would imply that the line was cut, but why at that moment? Was someone outside watching him and waiting for the call to go through to help increase the drama? It could have just been a coincidence, but this is one of the laziest tropes in all of media, and it drives me nuts. It's like when a character turns on the TV at just the right moment to see some important piece of information for the story. That kind of thing rarely happens in real life, if ever, and to see it happen time and time again makes me just want to give up on stories altogether. Can we please just find some other way that doesn't include something random happening at just the right moment? Like, maybe the 911 operator could be involved, or not believe them, which I know is another trope, but I don't think either of those things are as played out. Maybe the line could be down before he even picks up the phone. Like, what if someone cut the line earlier in the night to prevent calls in case the teens made their way back to the lodge? Anything but another played out trope. Speaking of played out tropes...
Okay.
It's probably the weather.
What weather, Ryan?
Maybe it was the bears.
Bear. And why does everyone blame everything on bears? Okay, so for the sake of argument, what if that bear that cut our phone line and just cut out all the power, what if that bear is waiting for us out in the hallway?
Thankfully, the phone isn't the only means of communication on the grounds, as Dylan suggests using some of the radio equipment that he uses to provide the camp with music in the summer to send out a signal. Taking that as their last chance to call for help, Ryan and Dylan leave the office and head back out into the main area to let the girls know where they're going. As they're doing that, Abby can be found trying to take care of Nick before Caitlin returns to let them know what's going on, and we find out that they might not be as alone in the lodge as they expected. Someone is walking around, and Caitlin goes to investigate, discovering Cletus in all his glory as he stalks the dark in search of the counselors. As she moves in to get a closer look, we can hear a voice on the radio talking to the man, and we learn that his name isn't Cletus, it's Bobby. And yeah, I can see that. He does kind of look like a Bobby. Though she tries to keep silent and stay hidden, Caitlin isn't much of a ninja, and it isn't long before she's running away, returning to Abby and Nick, minus her gun, because I was trying to do the right thing and not attack Bobby since, he doesn't seem to be too mean overall. But before she gets back, Abby and Nick have a little heart-to-heart, where Nick lashes out because Abby isn't returning his affection in the moment of terror. It would be easy to blame it on him just being not as nice as Abby thought he was, but it seems to be something else. As Bobby closes in on them, following Caitlin back to where they're hiding, Nick lashes out with an impossible amount of strength, slamming Bobby against a wall and nearly choking him out. As has been the case this whole time, I refuse to let Nick or anyone else hurt Bobby, so it doesn't go too far before the trio finally busts out of the building through a window before Bobby can get back on his feet. As all of that is going on, Dylan and Ryan are making their way to the Radio Shack. No, not that Radio Shack. The one where the old radio equipment is stored. Well, that doesn't really clear anything up. The shack where Dylan used to do the morning announcements and play his sick jams for the camp to party along to. Anyway, as they walk, they get to know each other a little more. And we find out that Dylan is actually a huge nerd. He only became the camp DJ and wise guy because...
Okay, so maybe I was a little nervous when I arrived in an uncomfortable social situation, and I overcompensated a little bit by making a bunch of jokes.
You played into it.
Yeah, I mean, people kind of enjoyed the blasé Dylan.
And I can totally understand that. As someone who's spent their life dealing with Asperger's and the social issues that come along with that, I can relate to faking a persona that winds up becoming the exterior you that people come to expect. It can be hard to fit in sometimes, and there's nothing wrong with hiding behind a wall like that until you're comfortable enough to share your real you with the people around you. It's moments like this that make me forget about the horror aspect just a bit, and really get into these characters. I think this game gets flack from people for being a little lackluster in the writing department at times, and for the characters being what some might see as nothing more than caricatures. But there's some really good stuff in here if you take the time to look for it. Funnily enough, that's also true within the story. If you take the time to assess the situations, instead of just acting on instinct, you might just find that there's more going on than what appears to be happening at first glance in Hackett's Quarry. As we approach the radio building, we run into another tarot card, and old Mama Braithwaite is going to be so happy with all the cards we found this week. But the cards must wait, as Dylan and Ryan get things set up, and we see that Dylan is a little more confident when calling for help than Ryan was with the phone back in Mr. Hackett's office. Though he maybe should have practiced, or at least ran it by Ryan before hitting the button.
Hello, how's it going out there? This is, we need help. We are counselors at Hackett's Quarry summer camp, and there's been a horrible accident, attack, some stuff bad here. We need your help. There is a swarm of bears, and they are everywhere, and there's these hunters too, and they seem to be shooting at the bears, but also at us, which is not good, and a few of our friends are hurt, and we are in desperate need of help, so please, there's vicious bears, and we don't know what to do, so please come help us. SOS, this is an emergency. Save our ship. Come on down, please help us.
I'm pretty sure I've heard more convincing calls for help in a Bethesda game at some point. If I heard that come over the radio, I would probably assume someone was pranking me, and I'd be on the lookout for a film crew, or maybe a YouTuber, depending on the year.
Swarm of bears?
Yeah.
Herd of bears.
Yeah, I've heard of bears, but...
Oh my god.
Awkward dialogue aside, they wind up overhearing what amounts to a response in the form of some radio chatter that sounds suspiciously like it's talking about them directly. As in, the guys that have been stalking them in the woods. And let's be real, that was the most likely outcome. Dylan said the radio would reach up to a mile or so at most, and there was a decent chance the guys hunting them, and whatever else is in the woods, were using radios. They didn't exactly think this plan all the way through, but there isn't much to do now except to deal with the monster that's decided to come looking for them. Oh, yeah, Ryan spotted something outside while Dylan was messing with the radio. I didn't mention it because he forgot to tell Dylan before Dylan opened the door of the shack to greet the thing. The beast climbs onto the roof of the building, and as if things couldn't get any worse, Caitlin, Abby, and Nick come strolling up like they're enjoying a nice Sunday afternoon walk. Ryan is able to warn them about the threat, and thankfully they're able to hide inside a cabin. The cabin that Abby and Emma broke into only hours before, showing us that breaking into buildings can be a good thing. In context, it's super important to focus on the context, because normally it isn't a good thing, but here it just so happens to have saved them. Boy, that sentence is really going to bite me in the... Anyway, Dylan comes up with a plan to scare the monster off using a high-pitched sound from the speakers. But he isn't able to complete the setup for this concept before the thing apparently grabs his arm and pulls him up to the ceiling? It's not 100% clear what happens here, except that Dylan gets bit, somehow only suffering an injury on his hand. And now we have a huge decision to make. Some kind of infection appears to be spreading up his arm, and he starts yelling at Ryan to cut his hand off. I'm having flashbacks right now to the Walking Dead game at this point, remembering how cutting off Lee's arm didn't really help the situation much. But Dylan seems pretty sure, and we gotta make a decision one way or the other pretty quick. So far, we don't have a lot of experience with these kind of situations, and there isn't really a reason to think that cutting off his hand is somehow going to be a good thing. But I've also seen enough creature features to know that a bite is usually a death sentence one way or the other. So we go ahead and grant Dylan his wish. We can use a chainsaw or the shotgun, but the chainsaw just seems way more fun. Humane. The chainsaw just seems way more humane. The whole thing takes less than a minute, and afterward, Ryan manages to finish the job with the speakers, grabbing the wire that Dylan failed to get. And after the monster runs off and things calm down, Dylan thanks us for our quick action.
Why did you do that? You told me to. That was a bad idea.
Well, he isn't fully thankful, but when it turns out that the bite would have ruined his life forever, he's going to be so happy with the choice that we made. Ryan and Dylan are able to reunite with the group as the monster is now gone. But things don't exactly get a lot better as a new face emerges from the darkness, shooting at something near the pool and forcing us to end on a cliffhanger once again. Thankfully, it appears the stranger wasn't shooting at our group, though as they approach the pool we find out that someone was hit, though the identity of the victim will have to wait. Welcome back once again to the Hackett's Quarry Summer Camp, where what doesn't kill you probably makes you stronger. I'm your guide for this special Halloween Philosophy and Ethics in Games series, Josh Bearhard Hawk, and this week we're finding out what's really going on at Hackett's Quarry, while also raising the question, what's actually going on at Hackett's Quarry? As is standard for YouTube, there's a playlist linked in the description, that little box that no one ever really reads. And likes are always welcome alongside your subscription, since now that you've clicked on the video, you're stuck in this eternal realm of torment forever. Speaking of being stuck in an eternal realm, we're backtracking a bit from the end of the last episode to meet a couple of new characters who seem to be lost on a dark road in the middle of the night. Laura and Max are a couple of camp counselors heading to the Hackett's Quarry summer camp, but they're heading up a little early and aren't really sure where it even is. You'd think in the age of MapQuest, they would have printed out some directions, but like some dweebs from the 1980s, they're relying on a good old-fashioned paper map, and Max's sense of always knowing right where he is. Trying to get them back on track, Laura picks up the map from the back seat to try and find the summer camp, and Max decides that looking down at the useless piece of paper is better than keeping his eyes on the road. That action is just one of my least favorite things to see during any scene that takes place in a car, and it seems to be a reoccurring thing. So many games, movies, and TV shows feel the need to film or animate scenes in vehicles that include the driver taking an inordinate amount of time to look anywhere but the road. It doesn't always end in some kind of accident, but it absolutely should, because you should never take your eyes off the road, especially when driving at night down an unfamiliar stretch of road in the middle of nowhere. Not only could there be other drivers and unforeseen twists, there's also hazards like deer and other animals that make a habit of crossing roads when they see the chance to take advantage of insurance policies. A friend of mine once hit a deer on a back road that definitely wasn't there a second before, and that deer sued him out of house and home. It didn't help that the judge was a possum with rabies, but that's a story for another time. Max's decision to look away from the road ahead winds up costing him as well. By the time he looks up, there's something in the road, and he barely has enough time to react. His speed, along with a lack of knowledge and experience when it comes to brakes and steering, causes him to veer off the road. After an eternity of crashing, the car finally comes to a stop, and the pair are lucky to be alive. As Max goes to check on the damage, Laura heads to the trunk of the car to grab the toolbox. And because I just can't help but snoop in other people's bags, she also finds a letter that Max didn't want her to see. It appears his application to Landis University was rejected, and he won't be going to college this fall as a result. It's not clear why he didn't tell Laura, but we'll probably find out more later. Heading back to the front of the vehicle with the toolbox and the world's greatest phone flashlight, she helps Max for a moment before boredom and intrigue carries her off to look at more interesting things. Seriously, about the flashlight, that thing looks like a mag light coming from an old iPhone, and I just can't get over how they have that kind of lighting, but couldn't get proper cell coverage to run a map. It's just such a weird thing. Like, they could have just given us a regular flashlight and I never would have noticed. But they chose to add the power of the sun to the back of the phone, and that's the most unrealistic part of this whole game. Tangent aside, she uses her godlight to search the forest, spotting someone running into the darkness not too far away. Well, we spot the apparent person. Laura seems to be freaked out a bit, but she doesn't really call out the apparition, so we can only assume it was meant for the player more than the playee. She does call out Max, telling him that she thinks there's someone in the woods because she thinks she heard a woman's voice, and the pair debate whether they might have hit someone and whether that someone might be in the woods before Laura decides to go off into the dark woods alone, with Max being perfectly fine with that idea. And at this point, both of them deserve to be eaten by whatever is in the woods around Hackett's Quarry. Looking away from the road while driving was dumb, but separating in the dark woods, especially in an area that they aren't familiar with, is just asking for trouble. What if something happened and one of them fell and wound up injured, unable to call out? They are making all of the wrong choices, and there's no way either of them makes it to the end of the horror movie. The good news is that we find a tarot card in the madness, so at least we'll get to salvage something from this fiasco. Bumbling around in the dark forest, Laura comes across a poster for some old sideshow called Harem Scarum. And wait just 1 minute. That woman on the poster looks awfully familiar. I swear I've seen her somewhere before, but I just can't place my finger on it. Yeah, she's probably just got one of those faces. There's also an escapology trunk to be found, with the handcuffs likely giving Laura some ideas for how to handle Max and his sense of direction, but that'll have to wait for another time. Before long, the darkness starts to get to Laura, and she begins panicking as she hears whispers in the air around her, and thinks that she sees something behind a tree. Just as she's reached her limit, the horror of the moment really ramps up. Abandoning any semblance of bravery, Laura rushes through the forest, somehow managing to avoid breaking any bones or running into any spiderwebs, as she bolts through the darkness back to Max in the car. Thankfully, Max was able to get the car back in working order while she was gone, and at her urging, he hits the gas, only to discover that their situation is a little more difficult than he realized. The car isn't all-wheel drive, and since this is a horror game, they just had to come to a stop in the mud, meaning they're stuck spinning their tires when they should be getting out of there. Before Max can figure out how traction works, the pair are surprised by a face in Max's window that turns out to be a police officer coming to their rescue. Granted, the officer is kind of creepy and he appears to have blood on his neck, but he's willing and able to help them out by hooking his winch up to the car and pulling it back onto the road. Once all 4 tires are back on the pavement, the officer questions why they're out there that late and shows his familiarity with the camp when he tells them that he knows they're a night early and that their best bet would be to stay the night at the Harbinger Motel instead. Laura doesn't like the pushback she's getting and talks back to the cop a bit before being asked to step out of the vehicle so the officer can mark the location of the motel on her map. All things considered, the officer is much more polite than he probably needs to be, given how rude the couple seems to be, but that's no doubt the famous upstate New York hospitality that we all know and love. After licking the pencil for some reason, he marks where they presently are and shows Laura where the motel is, before being tricked into nearly also marking the location of the summer camp. The cop recognizes her attempt, but not before she was able to note the location that he was about to mark in her head. Climbing back into the car and bidding farewell to the officer, Laura shows Max the location, and the pair set off to directly ignore the cop's instructions. Now, to be fair, the whole encounter does seem a bit odd, and for all they know, the man could just be pretending to be a cop, with the directions to the motel being nothing more than some kind of elaborate trap meant to provide victims to his secret serial killer friend. That might sound outlandish now, but just wait until we get further along. That theory kind of goes out the window when Max and Laura finally arrive at the summer camp, however, to find it completely empty. Laura said earlier that she'd spoken to Mr. Hackett about coming up a night early, but it turns out she'd only left a message on his answering machine because Hackett's Quarry summer camp is actually located in the year 1995. After snooping around a bit, Laura discovers what appears to be a person locked in the basement of the main building, and she and Max work together to break the lock off the door and go searching for the figure. But rather than finding a person in the basement, they discover a dog collar with the name Ian on it, as well as some bones that likely belong to the owner of the dog tag. And Max winds up being attacked by something. The attack leaves Max in pretty bad shape, and try as she might, Laura is unable to pull him up the stairs before the thing comes back for seconds. Laura barely has time to process what's happening when someone sticks a needle in her neck, and we find ourselves greeting our old friend the police officer, and he's not exactly happy to see us.
Does this look like the goddamn Harbinger Motel to you?
A few hours later, Laura wakes up in a prison cell, covered in blood, and no doubt wondering how she managed to wind up in jail. It's a familiar question we've all asked ourselves at one point or another in our lives, especially after spending a wild night in Vegas with the boys, where the last thing you remember is Travis's mom slipping you a Benjamin before taking you back into the members-only room at the Bellagio. Sure, the money was good at the time, but when bail the next day was several $100s, it made you question all of your life choices and promise to never drink watermelon wine again. Where was I? Oh, Laura. As she's struggling to get up, she sees the cop walk by, dragging an unconscious Max behind him to a different cell down the block. She hears some struggling, followed by the sound of a jail door, and then the cop walks back by to let her know that things are about to get a little messy. It's not entirely clear what happens next, but there's a growl and a lot of blood, and all we can assume at first is that Max is probably not doing too well down there. But that gets brushed aside as Laura passes out again, waking up a few hours later, handcuffed to a chair as the cop tosses a cup of water on her. And I gotta be honest, I didn't see this game going in this direction. I thought it was a horror game, but it would appear that we're heading into... Oh, the cop's interrogating her. Obviously. I choose to be compliant because I've played Detroit Become Human, and I don't want to risk angering this cop in case he moonlights for the Detroit PD. This approach flusters him, though. He didn't expect me to be so compliant, so maybe he's not so bad after all. Though, in the course of the questioning, we learn that the cop, or rather sheriff, shares the same last name as the man who runs the summer camp. And now we can put at least a couple of things out there. For one, why in the hell didn't the cop at least try to make up some excuse for why they shouldn't have gone to the camp? He could have easily just been like, hey, Chris Hackett, the guy who runs the camp, is my brother, and he's not at the lodge. It's empty tonight and there's no getting in, so just go to the hotel. This is a pattern with these Hackett men, as Chris pulled something similar when he refused to give the counselors in an earlier episode more to go on than just go inside and stay there because I said so. Did no one think this whole mess out ahead of time? It's a wonder they haven't lost campers and counselors before now, given the threat in the area. The sheriff takes Laura back to her cell, and we find out Max is alright, though he's naked and worried about what could have happened since the cell isn't exactly in great shape. There's blood everywhere, and he doesn't remember the previous night after being attacked. There isn't much time to dwell on their situation, though, as the sheriff returns with clothes for Max before taking him off to be questioned as well. At least Laura has some awesome poetry to read on the wall of her jail cell, though.
While the town of North Kill lay there sleeping, the hag in the woods started weeping. As the bodies decay, the wolves hunt their prey, and the sheriff continues his creeping.
Aside from that, she also discovers a loose brick in the cell that's been hollowed out, and now I'm really curious to know who was in the cell before Laura. They didn't leave anything in the brick, but it seems like a really convenient hiding spot just to be left unused. After a while, Max is brought back to his cell, and the two have the chance to talk through a few things, including the sheriff's relationship to Chris Hackett, Max's failure to get into the school that they were supposed to be attending together in the fall, and what happened the night before. As they discuss what all went down, they focus on the thing they nearly hit in the road and the fact that the police station they are supposedly in is void of life except for themselves and the sheriff. But that isn't even the most interesting thing they discuss, as Max puts up an idea about the thing that attacked him and the reason he doesn't seem to have any injuries from that attack on his body less than 24 hours later.
Hey, okay, so weird question. Do you remember before we got lost?
You got lost?
Well, yeah, but before that, I was all like, whoa, look at the moon. It's so big, so cool to see a full moon in the middle of the woods. And you were all like, yeah, no shit, Max, it happens once a month.
Yeah, so?
Right, so, you know, full moon.
Yeah.
What if,
Okay, no. Stop.
I'm just saying, you know, maybe there's a slight chance it was a werewolf.
Werewolves? Seriously? What the fuck?
A few more weeks in captivity don't really help their situation, as Max and Laura spiral slowly into their own little version of hell. The cop keeps them fed and lets them shower, but they still have no idea why they're being detained or what really happened on their last night of freedom. They finally make the decision to try and get on the cop's good side, if he even has one. And it kind of makes me chuckle because all I can think of is how this would be some wild reverse Stockholm syndrome. Normally, the captives wind up sympathizing with the captor, but the sheriff wants nothing more than to keep his distance and bide his time with no rhyme or reason to the madness. Though, that does make me want to try even harder to get on whatever good side he may have, and now I'm wondering if the whole thing is some big psychological game where he only wants us to think that he doesn't want to be friends in order to make us try to be his friend, and I'm probably just really overthinking it now. A last-ditch effort by Laura to get Sheriff Hackett's attention results in him rebutting her claim that Max is a werewolf by telling her that she doesn't know the half of it, deepening the mystery and showing that we're on the right path. Not long after, the sheriff is in Max's cell, telling him to strip, and for a brief moment I flash back to being handcuffed in his office, and I need to remind myself that this isn't that kind of film. It turns out there's a full moon, and the officer is concerned about keeping the clothes that Max is wearing intact. The plan doesn't really work, and Sheriff Hackett finally resorts to handcuffing Laura to a heater pipe outside of Max's cell so that she can see what's going to happen for herself before abandoning the pair for the night, with a promise to return first thing in the morning. And okay, so we're just gonna leave the prisoners in this mess to fend for themselves now with no explanation? Actually, that's par for the course with the Hacketts, so carry on. Laura observes and tries to analyze Max's condition, but it escalates really quickly. And before she knows it, her boyfriend has covered her in a messy substance and she's looking a lot like a pirate. Again, not that kind of show. The sheriff didn't really take into account the fact that Max could reach through the bars in beast form, and he manages to claw Laura's face, significantly reducing her depth perception by scratching out one of her eyes and forcing her to seek out medical attention in the form of some self-care from a first aid kit in the bathroom, and just wow. So far from everything we've seen between Chris and Travis Hackett, their family shouldn't be allowed to run a lemonade stand, let alone a summer camp or sheriff's office. They're incapable of explaining anything with any kind of credibility, and Travis, the sheriff, didn't once think that there could be any possible issue with leaving one of his prisoners tied up just a couple of feet outside of the cell where the other would be transforming into a werewolf. The least that he could have done would be to stick around for the 5 minutes it would have taken for Max to change, so he could then lock Laura back up before leaving. Now she's scarred for life and lucky to be alive at all. All thanks to the carelessness and stupidity of the man they call the sheriff. After fixing herself up and showing incredible resilience by snooping around the station for some clue to the mystery of what's going on, Laura lies back down in her cell to wait for her inept captor to return. And when he does return, we finally get some answers as he loosens up with a bottle of whiskey and talks to Laura while Max watches a video of what we can only assume is himself transforming. The sheriff does kind of beat around the bush in a way, hinting at his family's involvement with the whole werewolf thing, but he stops short of giving us the full picture. Instead, he provides a poem that gives some indication of what we're dealing with.
Let's see how smart you really are.
What is this?
Information.
Well, what does it mean?
Read it.
When full the moon above shines first, the beast internal shall outward burst. One by one leads lambs to slaughter. It stalks your breath, but shuns clear water. And should you yourself be cursed, armed with silver and the first, when moon is full before its wane, rend the beast that cursed you slain. No longer shall you face your blight, or fear the dread of full moon's light. And if it's a bite with which you're faced, cleave limb from torso with great haste. Perchance you'll save your cursed soul before infection takes its toll.
Starting to get the picture.
It's not a lot to go on. And frankly, it's shit. Why did they have to make it rhyme?
Breaking it down, we're dealing with werewolves that transform at the full moon. If you wind up being bitten, you'll be cursed to transform as well. And the only way to cure the affliction is to kill the werewolf who bit you using silver during the full moon. This presents a bit of a problem, as it might be kind of hard to hunt and kill the werewolf that cursed you when you yourself are a mindless beast out hunting prey. Going further, we also find out that you can avoid turning into one, even if you've been bitten, by cutting off the part that the werewolf bit. Meaning, we made the right call by cutting off Dylan's hand in the last episode. But we also get even more info as Laura overhears Chris and Travis arguing later on. Chris has figured out that Travis has the missing counselors locked up, and he isn't happy about it. Apparently, Travis has been keeping their presence in the jails a secret from even his family, and it turns out that Chris is the one who bit Max in the first place. Of course, that means that in order to cure Max, Chris is going to have to meet his end during the next full moon. But in order to make that happen, Laura and Max need to escape. That isn't really too difficult now, as Laura managed to stash one of the sheriff's knockout syringes in the hollowed out brick on the night that she lost her eye, but I wound up making it a little more complicated because I wanted to see if there was a way to escape that involved working with the sheriff. It turns out that there isn't, and after stealing his gun, locking him in the cell that he'd been holding Laura in for weeks, freeing Max, and stealing some ammo and guns, we hit the road to hunt down Chris Hackett. Laura went straight for the quarry, leaving Max to his own devices on the island and making her way back to find Chris Hackett before the moon gave way to the sun the next morning. And that's where Laura catches up with our beloved group of misfits in the pool changing room, after killing a werewolf that turned out to be Kaylee Hackett, the niece of Travis and the daughter of Chris. She and her brother Caleb are apparently also werewolves, and this whole thing is just getting messier by the minute. And in case you hadn't put two and two together yet, Max is the werewolf that Emma ran into on the island. Now, we know that Emma made it off the island alive, but no one else knows that yet, so we'll just keep it to ourselves for now. To make matters even worse, Laura went back to the island after killing Kaylee, thinking that she'd taken out Chris, only to discover that Max is still cursed and getting herself bit in the process. And that revelation doesn't sit well with the group, but we won't get to see how they respond until the big finale next Friday. So the picture is starting to clear up just a bit. We know that at least 3 of the Hacketts are werewolves, and one of them is now dead. Max is hanging out in the moonlight on the island after biting Laura, who is now racing the sun and the clock before she turns and has to wait for another month to try again. But we also know that both Nick and Emma had brushes with werewolves, meaning that 2 members of our group are also in danger of being cursed long term if we can't take out the wolves that bit them before the night is over. The end of another glorious year at the Hackett's Quarry summer camp is drawing near as we look up at the full moon and listen to the howl of the wolf formerly known as Max. Today, in this special Halloween episode of Philosophy and Ethics in Games, we're finishing our journey through the Quarry and finally finding out the answers to our biggest questions. I'm your humble camp leader, Josh Bearheart Hawk, and when we last met, we found out that the Hackett family has a big, hairy secret. Before we get too far into it, if you've missed any of the previous episodes in the Philosophy and Ethics in Games series, I've linked a playlist down below. As I break down games, I add the videos to that playlist so that people like you can sit back and binge on the widest array of philosophical breakdowns on YouTube anytime you want. There's been a lot that's happened to this point in the night, and our shrinking group of counselors has been finding it harder and harder to stay out of trouble. I kind of brushed over losing Nick in the last episode, as he didn't really deserve our time, but I'll mention it briefly here because he winds up being captured by Bobby and his pappy as we catch back up with Emma. Emma somehow survived the fall from the bridge earlier, and after checking the fire pit for any sign of her friends, she decided the best move would be to head back to the lodge. She was almost there when she came across the pair of men that she and the others had been ducking all night, and try as she might, she wasn't able to sneak by unseen. But they aren't able to catch her, mainly thanks to a second werewolf that showed up just in time to get the men's attention, and we're off to a wild start here. Finding the lodge empty, Emma does the only logical thing she can think of and hides in the van out front. I'm sure she'll be safe in there for the rest of the night, and we'll probably not see her anymore until dawn. With one counselor definitely safe, we join what we can only assume is another in the form of Werewolf Nick locked away in a cellar in the red light district. It's either that or some version of hell, as I'm not really sure why anyone in their right mind would use a bright red light to illuminate any kind of regularly used space. We also get the chance to meet a lovely older woman who is, for the moment, unnamed. She is involved in things in some way because we see her approaching and taunting the trapped beast, reminding us that not all little old ladies are friendly. Before leaving the dungeon, we see Bobby dragging Jacob through the tunnel and throwing him into the cell opposite the werewolf. Honestly, this is probably the best place for Jacob, as he wasn't exactly the greatest survivor or best boyfriend. With Emma, Jacob, and Nick accounted for, we rejoin our core group as they try to decide what to do with Laura, the counselor who showed up 2 months late for her job. On the one hand, Laura has been bit, and it's only a matter of time before she turns. But on the other, she's the most informed about the situation, as she spent the summer being held in a jail cell by the brother of one of the werewolves. It's always possible she was making the whole thing up, being some deranged lunatic who just has some grudge against the Hackett family for a parking ticket Travis issued her or something. But we'll just ignore that thought and push on because we really don't have a lot of options. After a brief discussion, the group decides to split up because that's just a thing you do when you know you're in a horror movie. Laura and Ryan are going to head for the Hackett horror house that apparently sits not far from the campground, while Dylan, Caitlin, and Abby make their way back up to the lodge to see about getting the van fixed. And as Laura and Ryan make their way to the house, we have a moment to discuss this plan because while Laura is aiming to just kill Chris Hackett, Ryan is convinced that there is more to learn. He knows Chris pretty well, and he even points out that the camp leader couldn't be involved because he was the one trying to keep the counselors safe by insisting they stay inside. This isn't foolproof logic by any means, but even Laura would have to admit that there's more going on than even she knows. She's overheard the fact that Chris was the one who bit Max, but from the sound of that conversation and the way that Travis was beating around the bush, it's clear that there's likely another player in this game, and going straight for Chris could be a mistake. And this also brings in the discussion of good and evil, as Laura seems convinced that Chris Hackett is a bad person because he bit Max and because he's hiding being a werewolf. But that reasoning is flawed in so many ways. First of all, Travis told Laura and Max straight up to go to the Harbinger Motel after saving them from Max's bad driving. Then, when they ignored that advice and went to the camp anyway, Laura had to snoop around and use a hammer to break the lock off a door that was well out of the way before they even came into contact with Chris. And Travis not only saved them, but held them in a jailhouse to protect them because he knew that Max would be turning and he wanted to find some way to fix everything. And that's without even bringing up the fact that Laura lied to Max in the first place about speaking to Chris ahead of time to get permission to come up a night early. If she hadn't lied, and they had instead just gone to the camp when they were supposed to, Max wouldn't have been bit, and she wouldn't have been planning a pirate costume for Halloween. That's not to say that everything that happened was her fault, but who knows what would have happened if they had been there through the summer. Maybe the group of counselors wouldn't have been short-handed, causing them to run behind schedule and allowing Jacob the chance to sabotage the van. Maybe they could have all gotten out of there on time and we wouldn't be racing the clock to save so many lives. We do know that Kaylee Hackett would be alive, as she's the one that Laura shot in the pool. She thought the werewolf was Chris because she didn't know that there was more than one. And that brings us right back around to where we started this diatribe, as she doesn't have enough information and would rather shoot first and ask questions later. At the same time, Travis Hackett shoulders even more blame here than Laura would, because he should have been completely upfront and honest with Laura about the situation instead of speaking in riddles and sharing the bare minimum information. If he'd told her in the first place that there were 3 werewolves in his family and explained what they were trying to do, things might not have gotten so out of control. But we are getting ahead of ourselves just a little bit. Reaching the perimeter of the manor, Ryan and Laura find a fence surrounding the property, blocking any chance of getting in until they stumble onto another way thanks to some weak boards and a man-made cavern below ground. The fall doesn't kill them thanks to a pool of water, and Laura finds out firsthand just how apt the camp motto is when she realizes the infection from the bite and exposure to water has healed her wounds. And that kind of makes me think. The Hacketts are missing out on a huge opportunity here to do some good in the world. If a bite from a werewolf has the power to heal things like Laura's eye, there has to be a way to use that to help others who might be ailing in various ways. Just hear me out. Imagine you take volunteers who are nearing the end of their lives anyway and get them infected. Then, when they change at the next full moon, you have a lineup of people who can approach a caged or otherwise restrained werewolf to get a bite themselves. After an hour or two, they jump in a bath and get cured of whatever may be wrong with them, and just before the sunrise, the werewolf gets killed off to ensure that no one else has to live with the plague in the short term. Of course, you'd also need to keep another werewolf alive to ensure that you had the ability to turn the sacrificial wolf each month, but I think it could work out nicely. I'm not sure what's worse here though. The fact that I could even come up with that idea so easily, or the fact that it sounds preferable to the American healthcare system. Crazy ideas aside, Ryan and Laura get a little bit of a scare when the sound of a woman whispering the name Silas echoes around them, and Ryan calls it out as the voice of the hag of Hackett's Quarry. We've already got werewolves, Ryan. Do you really think we need ghosts here as well?
This isn't a ghost story, it's a creature feature. It's really happening and you're all in it.
The cave and tunnel complex are actually pretty cool to see, and oh, would you look at that? A tarot card. I'd almost forgotten about those. Kind of weird that we would find the Lover's card down here in this tunnel of... Oh, I see what you did there, game. As if landing on top of Ryan isn't enough awkwardness, Laura ups the ante by taking a minute in their time-limited quest to bring up summer romance with the guy that she's known for all of 30 minutes.
So what's your deal then?
What do you mean?
The whole mysterious, brooding loner thing, it doesn't quite fit with the I love my camp leader vibe.
So I don't fit into the right box, is that what you're saying?
You know that's not what I mean.
I've been coming here for years. You get to know a place and it feels like a second home, you know? I mean, until now.
What about your friend, Caitlin? Is that her name? It seems like she looks up to you.
Yeah, she has the hots for me. Dylan does too.
Oh, modesty. Thy name is Ryan.
I'm not being smug about it. It's just a fact. They're not exactly secretive about it.
So what about you? Who do you like more?
I don't know. Maybe neither.
Thankfully, as they move on, we find another tarot card, making that 2 in this short stretch, and meaning we're going to score really big at some point. The tunnel finally leads to an old moonshiner hideout below the Hackett mansion, which wouldn't be a bad thing except that Laura and Ryan just happen to be the worst ninjas in the world.
What was that?
Huh?
What was that?
Oh, it's nothing. We got guests downstairs. We don't want any more blood on our hands.
That's alright though, as we managed to snag a third tarot card down here, and at this point, I'm ready to just turn tail and leave these two to figure things out on their own. I mean, it can't really get much better than 3 tarot cards in one spooky tunnel. Though, I'm sure Jacob would beg to differ as Ryan and Laura find him locked up. He asks them to figure out how to unlock the gate, but as we discussed earlier, he's better off locked in a cage than out wandering around where he can push people off bridges. But even finding Jacob takes a backseat as we finally get a peek into the life of the Hackett family with a conversation between Travis and his mother.
Why are you here, Travis? You ought to be out with the others. Like I say, we've been all night long trying to keep those kids safe.
Ma. It's Kaylee. She's dead.
No.
Boys are bringing her in right now.
Now I know you got to screw loose in that cop head of yours. There ain't no way to kill her in her kind of condition.
Silver bullet. She's dead, Ma.
No.
God damn.
No. No, no. No, no. Not my granddaughter. Not my only granddaughter. Not my Kaylee. Not my little Kaylee. Not my little Kaylee. Not my little Kaylee. You goddamn piece of shit! So, you had those motherfucking counselors in your goddamn jail for 2 whole motherfucking months, right? And you are telling me now that instead of putting a bullet into each one of their little sorry shit-stained brains, you gave them your silver bullet gun and they shot my Kaylee with it? Is that what you're telling me now, Travis?
No more blood on your hands. That's what you said it.
Oh my God, we are way past that now.
Ma, what if it had been me or Bobby? What then?
She was your family. A good boy protects his family. You ain't no good boy.
I wish I could take it all back. I wish I could take it all back, but I can't.
Well, I don't understand why you couldn't have just taken care of the problem when you had the chance.
Taking care of the problem? Do you hear yourself?
Yes, I hear my goddamn self. I may be old, but I ain't deaf.
I'm a police officer!
Oh, so now I'm blind, you motherfucker. Now I'm blind. Oh, you just flashing that badge around like it's worth $1 million. The only reason you got it is because Hank got killed in a gypsy fire.
Ma.
Don't ma me.
Would you sit down, please?
Don't you tell me what to do.
Please.
And don't you go around. Don't you go around like you better than everybody else, because you ain't.
Mrs. Hackett does a 180, from worrying about keeping blood off their hands to telling Travis how he should have handled the counselors, showing us how grief can change a person's outlook. Now, I'm not saying that Mrs. Hackett was the nicest person in the world to begin with. We saw how she acted earlier with the werewolf in the basement. But she seemed to at least have a level head on her shoulders and actually be at least a little concerned with protecting the counselors. All of that goes out the window when she finds out about Kaylee, and we can't help but feel at least a little sad for her as she seems so distraught at losing her only granddaughter. I could almost imagine a time at some point in the not too distant past where the family was whole. Mrs. Hackett might have liked to bake, and she would maybe bake pies and cookies for her grandkids, Kaylee and Caleb, on a regular basis. But something happened at some point, and now the family, while still trying to find some semblance of normalcy, is a shadow of what it once was. I say this because we see how Chris and Travis both seem to care in their own way about what happens to the counselors, with Chris trying to warn them to stay inside and Travis trying to protect Laura and Max, even after they very nearly ruined everything. Even Bobby and the old man, Mr. Hackett, seem to be more concerned with keeping the counselors safe than protecting themselves, as we could see them earlier when Emma stumbled on them as they tried to distract the second werewolf while she ran away. To this point, they could almost even be considered the good guys, even as the counselors aren't aware of what all has happened to keep them safe. But Kaylee's death changes a lot of things. And that's what grief can do if you let it. It can tear you up, guide you into bad decisions, and blind you to the truth of a situation. Laura and the counselors are going to take the brunt of the blame for Haley's death from Mrs. Hackett and the others, but the truth is a lot more complicated, and it isn't the fault of any one person. But we'll have to hold on to that train of thought because there's still a lot more to find out, and some other counselors to catch up with. Caitlin, Abby, and Dylan have made their way back to the lodge and, finding it empty, they head out to the van to try to get it running. But there's someone in there already. At first, they assume it might be Emma and Jacob, trying to keep each other warm. And they're at least partially right, as we watched Emma get in the van earlier. But one little detail we missed with her was the scratch that she received from Max back on the island. That was enough to infect her, and since we last saw her, she's transformed and is out for blood. The werewolf, formerly known as Emma, takes off after Abby, and for some reason I assumed that she'd be fine and decided to have Caitlin and Dylan run off the other way. I'm not really sure what came over me there, but thankfully the end of Abby is fixable. See, there's a feature here that lets us rewind when something horrific happens. And of course I'm going to go back and save her because unlike Emma, I'm not a monster. With Abby safe and sound in the basement, Caitlin turns into even more of a badass as she manages to scare off the werewolf with a few well-placed shots. There is an option here as well to either use regular shells or use the silver shell that Laura gave the group back in the pool house, but there's no way I'm using that silver unless it's absolutely necessary. We aren't Laura. We don't aim to kill without having all the information, and we don't jump to conclusions. After saving everyone's ass, Caitlin assesses the van and finds out just how stupid she was for giving Jacob the idea about stealing the rotor arm. though I'm not sure she really puts two and two together here, as the subject of why that particular part is missing gets brushed over. I kind of wish they would have given us the chance to have that conversation, but it is what it is. She also has to convince Dylan to accompany her to the nearby scrapyard, and he delivers a line that I imagine some people who watch this channel have uttered at least once.
Okay, well, just because you're using logic to make sense doesn't mean that I'm totally into it.
I might have said this before, but Dylan really is my favorite character in this game. Getting to the scrapyard, they spend some time perusing the pile of metal before wandering into a shop where we can find a receipt from where Travis scrapped Laura and Max's car earlier in the summer, which was kind of a dick move on his part. You're telling me that you couldn't have found anything else at all to do with the car that you more or less stole from the couple that you've been illegally detaining to protect your family's sordid secret? Maybe his mom was right about how he isn't a very good cop. Surprisingly, the search didn't turn up any dead bodies, but we do score another tarot card before the pair finally find a promising vehicle that allows Dylan to show off his mad claw game skills.
So, you ever operated a crane before?
I actually used to be pretty good at the claw game at my local arcade. The kids used to call me the grabber.
Nope,
Oh, and Dylan stumbles across another sign for the Harem Scarum show in the form of a large wooden display that's been shoved in the back corner of the scrapyard for some reason. This one is a little more clear than what we've seen in the past, and it tells us that our friend, the fortune teller, actually has a name. Eliza. I'm pretty sure it isn't that Eliza, but that would make for some amazing lore, and someone should get Lin-Manuel Miranda involved. The world needs Hamilton 2, Eliza's Future, the story of how she learns magic and spends the next couple hundred years traveling with a sideshow. I'd watch it. Fanfiction about Eliza Hamilton aside, Dylan manages to get the car that Caitlin wants to check down, but things can't just be that easy. The motion sensor lights in the scrapyard start lighting up, hinting at something moving through the yard. And Dylan only has a moment to warn Caitlin before a werewolf emerges and goes after her. Lifting the car into the air, Dylan moves the crane all around in an attempt to shake the monster free, but he winds up throwing Caitlin free instead. She only has a moment to try and get away before the werewolf corners her, and just as it's getting ready to strike, Dylan drops the car, crushing the beast for the time being.
Yeah, no sweat. I just can't wait to see who they choose.
What?
To play me in the movie about how brave I am.
Don't push it.
With Dylan and Caitlin being safe for now, we catch back up with Laura and Ryan in the Hackett house. Laura has managed to get herself caught, and things aren't looking great as she fights with Mrs. Hackett over a gun before Travis attempts to calm things down, and we discover a connection between Hackett's Quarry and Detroit Become Human, in the form of the Hackett patriarch, Jebediah Hackett. It turns out that he leads a double life, having been a world-renowned artist known as Carl Manfred before apparently moving away from it all to presumably escape the androids that took over Detroit. It's obvious now that he faked his death to get Marcus to leave him alone and moved to upstate New York, where he traveled back in time, opened a quarry, and started a family. That change somehow altered the timeline, and now instead of androids, we have werewolves. Or, he could just be voiced and acted by a renowned artist and actor known as Lance Henriksen, who's had many amazing roles over the course of his career, but that's not as fun as an unfounded conspiracy theory. Bobby joins the party as things are just heating up, pulling Ryan along with him, and the situation seems like it's inescapable at this point. But don't tell Laura there's no way out. She's pretty good at escaping against impossible odds, or at least will pretend that the odds to this point have been impossible for her. Thinking fast, she starts making a weird noise? It's really one of the most annoying things that she could have done, though it does work as a distraction for Ryan as he's able to get away. Thankfully, once that's happened, Ma Hackett does us all a favor and shuts Laura up. It's not permanent since she's, a werewolf, but it'll keep her down for a bit as we follow Ryan in his attempt to escape the Hackett house. Bobby stabbed him before he got away, so that's not helping matters. but we are given the chance to either remove the knife or leave it in. As anyone with even a tiny amount of medical knowledge knows, you never remove the object that's impaling you because it could be cutting into some internal organ or vein, and taking it out could mean bleeding to death in minutes. Though I will say that I second-guessed myself as another tarot card came into view to remind me what was at stake. I suppose the death card had to be somewhere. After snooping around the room for a bit and ultimately hiding from Bobby in a closet, Ryan is able to get away, if only to allow himself to continue running from the Hackett family for a short while. He's not the only one though, as Laura wakes up from her nap with what is undoubtedly a splitting headache. There doesn't seem to be anyone around, and she winds up having free rein to explore the house for a bit, stumbling on another tarot card as she goes, before eventually running into Ma and Pa Hackett once more. They're obviously not thrilled to see her, and she has to fight her way out of the situation while also trying not to turn into a werewolf. As a last-ditch effort, she winds up flipping the switch on an oddly placed breaker box, taking us all the way back down to Jacob, as the action apparently opened the door on both his and the werewolf cells, leading to his demise. We have the option to save him with a rewind, but that's not going to happen. Laura escapes with a little help from Travis, who's just trying to calm the situation as best he can. And as she bolts off into a nearby hallway, we get back to Ryan as he's still trying to escape Bobby. Neither of these counselors seem to stand much of a chance, as things just keep getting worse. But he does somehow manage to avoid Bobby long enough to even the odds, using the knife in his side. Pulling the blade out, he plunges it into the big man's chest, and the reaction from Bobby is possibly the best thing I've seen in this game.
Oh, you stabbed me!
Yeah, fucking hurts, don't it?
I ain't never been stabbed before.
Leave me alone.
Ow, it really hurts.
Dad!
While pulling the knife out might have saved his life, it also doomed it, as he's now bleeding profusely and seems to have no way to fix this one. That is, no way until Laura drops in. Using her best superhero entrance, Laura fights the urge to go full dog and manages to save Ryan using a bite just like I mentioned earlier. And I feel like this is just such an untapped medical opportunity. If it can work here, it could work on so many other things, and now I want a sequel that lets us do this. Technically, the choice to bite Ryan is optional, but of course I'm going to do it because there's no downside as far as I can see. Sure, it means that Ryan will have to kill his camp daddy, but that was always going to be the case because you can't reason with a transformed werewolf, and Laura wasn't going to wait until dawn to talk things out with Chris. With a fresh bite making him feel better, Ryan leans on Laura and the two make their way upstairs, going to the attic of the house for some reason, and finally coming face to face with the boss of the dungeon, werewolf Chris Hackett. He's tied to a post, but that isn't enough to keep him in place as he smells the blood of his favorite counselor and breaks free. A weak spot in the attic floor gives way as he makes his way to the pair, and together they free fall through the house, ending up at what I assume is ground level and bringing chaos as everyone is now in one place. We've got Bobby, Mr. and Mrs. Hackett, werewolf Chris, Travis, Ryan, and a very unstable Laura, who winds up shedding her skin to become the 6th or maybe 7th werewolf. Honestly, I've lost track, and I'm just ready to cash in these tarot cards for whatever prize Eliza has in store. Bobby and the Hackett parents are eaten by Chris, as Travis tries like hell to avoid the same fate, with Laura trying to take a bite out of him as well. Ryan has to act fast, securing the shotgun that is thankfully loaded with silver bullets just in time to take Chris out and free everyone from the curse. But that's not really the end, because that would be too easy. We still need to turn in our tarot cards, including a very special card that Abby was able to find after being left alone in the basement at the lodge. The Hierophant card triggers Eliza into revealing a deep pain that she's been hiding throughout the game. She was a fortune teller in a traveling show, sharing possible futures with those who would seek knowledge of what might be. She had a son, Silas, who suffered from a rare condition that made him the perfect attraction as a dog boy alongside her act. Kaylee Hackett felt sorry for Silas, believing that no one should spend their life locked in a cage, and she decided one night to try and set him free. But something went wrong. Kaylee's brother Caleb started a fire near a bundle of hay that wound up engulfing the entire sideshow before anyone knew what was happening. The whole thing was an accident. The fire was supposed to be nothing more than a small distraction so Kaylee could get Silas out without being seen. As she tried to process what was happening and figure out a way to get her boy back, Eliza was killed in an explosion. With no way to save Silas before she died, she would spend the next several years searching the woods for the dog boy as a ghost. But she wasn't alone in her search, as after freeing Silas, Kaylee's brother Caleb wound up being bitten and becoming a werewolf. Kaylee and their father would fall into the same fate before all was said and done, and someone in the family would figure out the solution when they found the poem that Travis shared with Laura in the prison. All they needed to do was hunt down and kill Silas during the full moon, and their family would go back to being normal. But that would be easier said than done, as the Hacketts would spend the next several years hunting the white wolf with each full moon, failing each time to find him. Failing until now, that is. Thanks to Laura and Ryan having seen Silas, first on the road as the thing that Max almost hit, and then near the cabins when Dylan and Ryan were trying to send an SOS signal, the trio of Ryan, Laura, and Travis are able to pinpoint where Silas is likely hiding. It turns out he went back to the place where everything started, the cage his mother had him locked in. Heading into the woods, they're able to locate Silas in minutes, effectively solving in one night what the entire Hackett family couldn't figure out in 6 years. And with a single shot, the curse was lifted completely. Of course, the only one left cursed at the time was Caleb, who would have probably been just fine if not for a run-in with Caitlin and a little bunny. That's right, we're bringing this puppy full circle. Remember that little stuffed bunny that Abby found all the way back in episode 1? The bunny that I told you specifically not to forget? Yeah, that little thing winds up saving Caitlin and Dylan. How, you ask? Well, after coming back from the scrapyard, the pair find themselves in the spooky lodge one last time. And it isn't long before something is trying to get in. The Caleb wolf bursts through the chimney, destroying a likely priceless painting in the process. There's a wild chase through the lodge, out onto the roof and back inside, with several close calls as both Caitlin and Dylan run for their lives. Going into the kitchen, they seem to be trapped, with the only way out being blocked by the monster. Caitlin opens the freezer and has the option to either hide inside or to find some way to trap the werewolf in it. Looking around for inspiration, she spots Abby's bag with a little bunny sticking out, and she knows just what to do. Grabbing the toy, she activates it and tosses it into the cold abyss, getting the attention of Caleb, who dashes in after it. Before he can come back out, she shuts and locks the door and celebrates saving both her and Dylan's lives. The freezer is the perfect place to trap the wolf, since there isn't much that can kill it, but the cold box isn't the best place for Caleb after the curse is lifted. He, like everyone else that isn't Travis and the Hackett family, won't make it to see the sunrise, despite the end of the thing that's been plaguing them for 6 years. While the Hacketts may have been devastated, how did our counselors fare? Max, who was on the island most of the night, made it out alive after successfully biting both Emma and Laura. Jacob didn't make it, being mauled to death by Nick, who had that single kill to his name before he wound up surviving the night. As for Jacob's love, Emma made it through the night as well, with no confirmed bites or kills to her name. Abigail made it out alive, making her way to the safety of Chris Hackett's private security bunker after escaping from Emma. Both Caitlin and Dylan survived, of course, and Ryan managed to survive thanks to my patent-pending medical miracle mentioned earlier. And that's pretty much it for the Quarry. We managed to survive the night with only one major casualty, and let's face it, Jacob wasn't exactly the worst one to lose, all things considered. This was one of those games that's a hit or miss for a lot of people, with one of the biggest knocks on it, from what I could tell, focusing on the campy nature, the unrealistic characters, and the fact that it was originally supposed to be a sequel to Until Dawn, which is another massively popular game that I'd like to cover at some point in the future. But to be able to cover games like that, I need your help. Liking the video and subscribing to Lost in Games on YouTube is always a great way to help get more eyes on the videos that I make, and in turn, help me continue diving into games like The Quarry, Detroit Become Human, Red Dead Redemption 2, The Walking Dead, and more. Signing up for a channel membership or joining on Patreon helps me to buy more games like Until Dawn to break down, and to afford storage for the gameplay footage that I use in my videos. Patrons and channel members also get cool perks like having their name on the screen in videos to say thank you. Next week, we'll be having some fun for the first ever Lost in Games Halloween special by discussing ghost hunting through a game called Demonologist and a real-world experience in one of the most haunted buildings in America. So, keep an eye out for that. That's all I've got for now. I want to thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.